Well, it's great to be here tonight. It's great to see you all. John asked me a couple of weeks ago if I wanted to speak tonight, and so of course I was just trying to think what I should speak on, and something's happened in the past probably week. Actually, several times the same thing has happened, and so I decided something that I feel like our church has really been strong in and a foundational thing for us as people for a long time, but I don't feel like we've talked about it very much lately, is a dirty word in most people's minds, especially in church, and the word is accountability. And whenever you realize that, it is, but if you don't understand the power of it or the need in our lives for it, for most people, you say something about accountability and they either have no clue what you're talking about, which I experienced in the past week with somebody, or they just don't want any part of it because it doesn't feel good and nobody likes it, right? It's just the way that it is for us as human beings. And of course, I left my house and forgot my iPad, so I'm going to have to squint and look at my phone. So first thing that I want to do is define accountability. So I think that's important, that we know what we're talking about, what it actually means, what the definition of something is. So accountability is the obligation to take ownership of one's actions, decisions, and their outcome. Okay? And so you say that to somebody, most people are going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take responsibility for the things I decide to do. Somebody else should do that. That's not for me to do, right? Because a lot of times the things that we do or the things that we say, the actions or decisions that we make, we don't really think about very well before we do it, correct? Right, we don't process things before we do that. I'm like the worst. You can ask my wife. I say things and then I think about it and I'm like, I probably shouldn't have said that. That's just that's just part of how I am, is I think something real quick and I say it, and then I really think about what I say, and I'm like, that was dumb. And I think, especially men, we've all done that, right? Today. And so I know that whenever I first heard anybody teach or talk about accountability, I thought, man, who in the world who would desire to have that as a part of their life? Well, if you're looking at different areas of your life, say you're a business person, that's probably something that you would desire to have in your business because it would only create a better situation for you. Correct? If you had somebody that you talked to that held you accountable for the things you did in your business to ensure that it was growing healthy and moving in the right direction, any person in business would say, yeah, I want that. Because that's the whole reason that I do this, is to grow and become better. Well, in our spiritual life, that should be the same desire that we have, is that, yeah, I want to grow and become better at what I'm doing. All right, I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better friend. I want to be better. I want to be more like Jesus in everything I do. And Jesus is way better than us at everything. So we just want to be better at the things that we do. All right, I'm going to read a couple verses that go along with this, because some people probably think, this isn't in the Bible. It is. Galatians 6, 1 through 3 says, Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly, remember those two words, gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. If you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. You are not that important. I like that. All right? James 5:16 says, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. Then probably my favorite one is Proverbs 27:17, and everybody knows that one. Iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. And that it takes, the reason that I like that one the best is that it takes iron rubbing together to sharpen iron. And so does that mean that if you find somebody, and it's important that you find the right person to help you be accountable. You can't, just don't pick anybody, all right? Because it's important that the things that you share and they share are kept between you two. Nobody else finds out about them. And that you're not like, I don't know, it might be a good idea if you picked your mortal enemy. You'd probably become really good friends. But like somebody that you would feel comfortable enough with sharing things that you probably aren't going to share with anybody else, right? And so that means you rub together. That's what sharpens iron, is it rubbing against other iron. And so you have to be willing to be uncomfortable and vulnerable in front of somebody else in order for that to actually take place, for that to sharpen you. And that is really, really difficult. It is not easy to do that. I'll tell you, as a pastor on this side of it, and you can ask John Paul, you can probably ask Marcus and Andrea as well, because they do a lot of stuff like this, of meeting with people and them telling you the things that's going on in their lives. And often I would find myself sitting there, I still find myself sitting there going, I really want to talk to somebody as well. Like, I got some stuff I need to tell somebody too. It is really hard to constantly hear what's going on in everybody else's lives without you being able to do the same thing. And to me, that's a huge pitfall in people in ministry, is that they do that so often and they never get to have the same thing happen with themselves. I'll never forget a story that Craig told one time of a pastor that he'd pastored for like 40-something years. And when he died, he had this room in his basement. It was under his stairs. I'll never forget this story. It was under the stairs in the basement, and it was where he went to write his sermons and do all that stuff. And none of his family ever would go in that room. That was his room. And they went in there, and there was tons of stuff in there that should not have been in there, that had been hidden for years and years and years. And it was because he didn't have somebody that he felt that he could have conversations with to get healing from things, right? And so it's super important. It's just as important for a pastor or a worship leader, anybody that you look at and you think, oh, like, you know what, they got it all together, or I'm going to call and meet with them. They need it just as often as anybody else does. All right, I just wanted to point that out, that it sometimes, you know what, if I don't know about if any of you do, but if you go and meet with Marcus, just say, hey, do you need to talk about something? It'd probably be a good thing. All right? Because I know that in the last week, I've sat through like 5 meetings with people, and in every one of them, I thought, okay, I got to call and talk to somebody. Just from something that they said that brought something up in me that I thought, okay, I need to talk to somebody about that, right? Just because it reminds us, a lot of times when I talk to other people, it reminds me of the brokenness in myself. And that I don't want those things to stay broken forever. I want to be healed over and over and over as I become more and more and more like Jesus. I don't want to just hang on to the stuff that I have and help other people get over their stuff. So it is a two-way street. It absolutely is that, a two-way street, accountability is. So the things, though, that, because this in the past week, I met with somebody and talked to them about this very thing, because they were talking about going to like a psychiatrist and having that available. And I said, but do you have somebody that you just meet with on a regular basis and just talk about your life and the things that's going on? Because something devastating happened in this person's life, and this person goes to church and teaches Sunday school and like does all the things, and had this horrible thing that had a hold of their life and had never talked to anybody about it. And even had a really close-knit job with people, and they had no clue what was going on. And often the people that are teaching Sunday school and doing all that stuff are the hardest ones to get to understand, because they're like, no, but I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to. No, you're not. Just going to church and teaching Sunday school, and I don't care how many of those things you're doing, you're not doing anything one-on-one with somebody and being vulnerable with anybody. And that's probably the hardest but most important part of accountability, is that I am bearing my soul to somebody else, all the nastiest, ugliest things, and allowing them to share in that with me and walk with me through healing of those things. And I'm going to say this loosely, and y'all can disagree, but I think it's probably worse of a problem with men than it is women. I think women are a little easier to get in touch with their emotions than men are. Men want to be tough and not cry and just stuff everything. And that is a recipe for disaster. And that was exactly this one meeting that I had. That was exactly the thing, was so many things that got stuffed over a whole lifetime that nothing else could fit. And an entire life got destroyed because of it. And I told this guy before we parted ways, I said, you really need to find somebody that you trust to talk to, and every week, like don't let a week go without doing it. Every week, meet with this person. Figure out a time. I don't care what your work schedule looks like. Figure out a time and do it. If you care about yourself and you don't want your life to be completely destroyed, everything in it, this is an easy way to fix it. Right? Jesus helps us a lot, but we have to have each other. And the danger is you don't have that. It becomes just about you and Jesus, and you become an island. And I hate to tell you, Jesus knows everything anyway. Like, whatever you think you're hiding from him, he already knows it. But there is an immense amount of power in us speaking it out to somebody else. Because I don't know about you, but what I've found probably the most profound part of having an accountability person in my life is that I can know something, but it like becomes real when you speak it out of your mouth. Right? I can know something in my mind, but whenever I actually say it, I put words to it, then it becomes real. And when you do that in the presence of somebody else, it breaks the hold of the darkness over whatever that is. So if it's alcohol or control or anger or whatever it is, unforgiveness, there's so many things that we all deal with in our lives that need that broken, that need light shined in them. And so if we're willing, I think the hardest thing is that it takes us being vulnerable and letting go of control, which is probably two of the hardest things for any human being to deal with, is I'm gonna be open and honest with somebody else that's not me, right? That's probably one of the hardest things for most of us, is sometimes we struggle with even being honest with ourselves, right? Like that. Sometimes that's one of the hardest things is being honest with ourselves. And so if we can't be honest with ourselves, it's pretty impossible to be honest with somebody else. And so the thing is, whenever we get to the point of, I've had enough of all of the garbage that's going on in my life. And I've gotten to this point so many times because I have lacked the persistence of saying, no, I've got to, I have to have somebody in my life that I'm meeting with. And the hardest time for me was whenever I lived in Michigan, because I couldn't trust anybody. I didn't know anybody. Like, it was super hard. I at least once a month would call Don Ragland, just beside myself, because I didn't know, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what to do, and I just needed to talk to somebody, and I just didn't have that. And so our church is full of great people to be able to do this with. And it's a two-way street, but sometimes you have to know for yourself, if you're willing to do this, to have somebody that you can sit down with and just be honest with, but you have to also ask permission for it to be right? I've had guys call me and say, hey, I really need somebody to hold me accountable. I'm like, okay, that's great. All right, can we meet? Yeah. And then they want it to be a two-way street, and I'm like, I don't know you well enough. I'm not talking to you about my stuff. I'm sorry. I'm more than happy to listen to you, but I have somebody that I meet with. It's far better for it to be a two-way street, and you can just both people be honest and open. And but you do also have to realize that, right? This isn't Vegas. Sometimes people don't allow what happens somewhere to stay there. Okay, and so you have to guard yourself on a little bit of discernment on, is this somebody that I feel like I can really trust to do this? And that's a hard thing to do, because and why I say that, some people might be like, no, I don't agree with that. The problem is, if you have a problem with trust and you do that and somebody breaks your trust, it's harder the next time to allow it to happen again. And every time your trust gets broken, it's harder and harder and harder to do that, to trust again. And another huge part is that you have to go into these relationships, because that's what you're doing, is building a really good, strong relationship with somebody else. And you have to go into them, one, knowing that when somebody shares things with you, that it's not a spot to judge people at all. Like, you can, I always remember that we do, everything that we do and when we're speaking is to speak the truth in love. And if we go back to 2 Corinthians and look at what love is, make sure that whenever we're speaking, it has those attributes, right? That we're not putting somebody down. I can't believe you do something like that. Well, those things aren't good to say. Like, it's usually good to be like, whether you do or not, I feel, or I know where you're at, or I've been there, right? Because that's what most of the time that we need to, that we want to know, is that we're not alone in the things that's happening. Now, I've had plenty of times of people that have dealt with, drug or alcohol addictions, and I'm like, look, I've never dealt with that, so I don't know what that feels like. I'll do my best to understand, but I'll just be very upfront. I don't know what that's like. I've never dealt with that in my life. Thank God I've never dealt with that in my life. But I want to help you figure out how to not have to deal with it anymore either. But it's something this is something that we all, as human beings, we all need to be held accountable for the walk that we're walking, and be willing to do the same thing for other people. That it's not that I just need to find somebody to hold me accountable, but I'm unwilling to walk with other people through their stuff as well. We have to be willing to do both. And it really needs to be a desire that we do both. I know that, I'm trying to think the first person that I ever did this with. Okay, I know the first person I ever did it with. And I feel extremely lucky or blessed that this person approached me, but it would have been the person that I would have picked myself. If I could have picked somebody. And he just came to me, and he was dealing with some stuff in his life and his marriage, and he said, I have to talk to somebody. And I prayed about it, and you were the only name that came to mind. And I was like, okay, great, let's do that. And I had no intention on this being a two-way relationship. But it became one of the best relationships I ever had. And I still have a great relationship with this guy. We're not accountability people anymore because I moved and he found somebody else. But every time that I see him, we are extremely sincere with wanting to. How's your family doing? How's your life going? And I just come out and ask, do you still deal with these same things? Is that over in your life? And so it gives us an open door. Then, after we begin to do this, to be honest with people, even if that's not the place that we're at with them anymore. And that's probably the thing that I love the most, because I'll see him randomly whenever I'm not in a good place, and he'll ask me. And I can just throw up on him. And he loves it. He doesn't care at all. But it's super important for our spiritual growth for us to be willing to be vulnerable, to let go of control, and allow other people into our lives. The mess that we have I don't know, is anybody else's life not a mess? Mine is. I think all of our lives are pretty messy, right? And the one of the crazy things is we look at people and we think, oh, that person's got it all together. And none of us have it all together. Nobody sitting in here would be like, yep, I've got it all together, no problems. Everything's perfect, right? Jim, did you say you did? No. Most of you are in a life group, I'm assuming. Most of you are here or go to church here all the time. And that is a great place to be vulnerable and share and everything, but you can still hide there. You absolutely can. It is really, really hard to hide when you're one-on-one with somebody. Even in a group of 5 or 6 people, you can still hide there. Another person that I talked to this week goes to a life group and was hiding tons of things, even in the middle of a life group. And so it is vitally important that we're willing to take purposeful time. I think that's probably one of the harder things about it, is that I have to set time aside and make sure, like the only thing that I know I'm doing every day other than going to work is I go to the gym at 4 o'clock every evening. And if I can make that important enough, then I can set aside an hour and a half, one day a week, to meet with somebody and talk to them. And that's something that as believers, and I believe that just like what John Paul was talking about, how ministry has for so long been about being built up, and now it's going out. And the more that we face things in the world, the more that we need people to carry our burdens with. Because as we face things in the world, I don't know about you, but this is the way that it happens with me. I encounter people in the world, and I'll see things that's going on in other people's lives, and it's almost like I see a reflection of myself in some of the things, and I'm like, God, I don't want to be in that place. Not that I'm any better than anybody, but it points out things that I see in myself that I then say, God, I want you to work those things out of me. And the best way to do that I know of, is with somebody. How many people have had an issue in their life and said, Jesus, forgive me for that. God, I repent of that. And then you do the same thing tomorrow. It's a lot different whenever somebody else knows that that's going on and they call you tomorrow. Yeah. And say, hey, did you do that today? That makes a huge difference in our lives. And it is vitally important to the growth of the church and to us individually that we're willing to do this. And like I said, I feel like our church this has been a foundational thing of our church for a long time, but I felt like in some of the things that's happened in the past week, I thought, I'm sure there are people sitting in our church that don't understand the importance of why that people do this. Why people have other people in their lives that they can be honest with and share the hardest things that we're going through, the ugliest things that are a part of our lives, and they don't get judged for them. They just say, okay, let's walk through this together. And that is the beauty of accountability. Even though it's not easy, it's a choice to do that. And nobody can force you to do it. That's the other thing. There's one guy that I'm meeting with every week now, but for months and months and months, I've told him, hey, I'm available whenever you want to meet with me. Every time I see him, I tell him that. And he'd be like, yeah, we need to. And finally I said, look, quit saying we need to if you're not going to do it. Just tell me when and I'll be there. And so he said, okay. And he told me when and where, and we've done it twice. And this is somebody I feel safe with, so I've shared all of my stuff with him as well. And it's still hard, but it's amazing to see the freedom that you feel when you leave something like that, right? Our minds and the world would want to tell you, you don't want to do that because it's just going to bring up things that you don't want to think about or deal with. No, like Jesus honors those things, and he does healing in us as we spend time with other people, sharpening each other, becoming better people, allowing those things that are in our heart that offend God to be stripped away with another person. And if you think, that's not for me, or I don't really think that works, try it. Ask somebody to be that for you. And I guarantee you, it will dramatically change your walk, your attitude towards other people, so many things that it helps. But you have to be honest with yourself and be willing to be honest with somebody else. It's not you can't fake it till you make it doing this. You have to just be real. And you have to allow somebody else to be close to you. And I feel like in our world today, that's probably one of the hardest things, because as long as you need anybody to roll all day long and mindlessly numb everything, and you don't need anybody, right? You got all the cat videos you want to watch. But it's super important to our growth as believers. And as our world continually goes farther and farther south, the need for us to be strong and courageous and being willing to face the things that we have to face is super important. And one of the guys that I met with this week, he said, which I've met with him before, but not on a very consistent basis. He said, I figured out what this does. And I said, what? And he said, meeting with you. And I said, okay, what's it do? And he said, it seals the cracks up. And I said, okay, tell me what that means. He said, I feel like there's always an area that sometime during the day that Satan wants to try to get in. And just us meeting once a week, those places aren't there anymore. Because I know that I'm going to meet you here next week, and I'm going to have to tell you all of the things that's happened. And I said, that's a fantastic thing to think about, because we all have cracks, right? And Satan so easily just works his way into our lives. And so I just want to encourage everybody, if you don't have somebody, find somebody that will do that, that'll be there for you, that will allow you to bear their soul with you. And love them in the middle of it. Don't judge them. Don't think that, they're terrible people. Just love them where they're at, because that's what we need. That's what I need every time that I need to talk to somebody, is just somebody to say, yeah, that really sucks. I hate that you're going through that. Let's see what we can do to make that better. And I'm gonna walk with you the whole way through it. So that's about all I got to share.